He never hit me. Not once. But somehow, he managed to break me piece by piece until I couldn't recognize myself anymore. The woman staring back at me in the mirror had become a stranger, hollow-eyed, constantly apologizing, walking on eggshells in her own home. Physical abuse leaves bruises that others can see. But psychological abuse? It's invisible. It happens behind closed doors, in whispered conversations, in subtle glances that make your stomach drop. It happens in the words that aren't said and in the constant, gnawing doubt that maybe, just maybe, you really are as crazy, incompetent, and unlovable as he says. My name is Erin, and for 7 years, I lived in a beautiful prison constructed by the man I thought was my soulmate. A prison without bars, where the locks were made of fear, confusion, and shame. A prison I didn't even know I was in until I was already serving a life sentence. This is my story. It's not easy to tell. Even now, 3 years after leaving, my hands shake as I type these words. Part of me still hears his voice in my head, warning me that no one will believe me, that I'm exaggerating, that I'm the crazy one. But I need to share this because somewhere out there, someone is living my nightmare right now. Someone is questioning their reality, apologizing for things they didn't do, and slowly disappearing inside themselves while wearing a smile for the world. This story is for you. You're not crazy. You're not alone. And yes, there is a way out. I met David at my best friend's wedding. He was a charming groomsman who somehow knew exactly what to say to make everyone laugh. I watched him work the room with effortless confidence, making the grandmothers blush, high-fiving the children, and somehow managing to compliment everyone in a way that felt genuine and specific. When his eyes finally landed on me, I felt special in a way I'd never experienced before. It was as if the entire room dimmed and a spotlight appeared between just the two of us. "You must be Erin," he said, taking my hand. "I've been waiting to meet you all night." That night, David listened to me talk about my dreams of opening my own photography studio. He asked thoughtful questions. He remembered tiny details about stories I told. He looked at me like I was the most fascinating person he'd ever met. Our courtship was a whirlwind: romantic dinners, surprise weekend getaways, handwritten notes left on my car windshield. He called it love at first sight. I called it too good to be true. My friends called it a fairy tale. "I've never connected with anyone like this," he'd whisper, brushing the hair from my face. "You understand me in a way no one else ever has." He showered me with extravagant gifts I couldn't afford to reciprocate. When I expressed concern about this imbalance, he seemed wounded. "Can't you just let someone love you? Why do you have to question everything good that happens to you?" I didn't realize then that this wasn't just courtship. It was love bombing, the first phase of narcissistic abuse. The phase where they study you like a textbook, learning exactly what you crave, what you fear, what makes you feel valued. They become everything you've ever wanted. They mirror your deepest desires back to you. And it works because it feels so real. Because in that moment, it is real to them too. They're equally caught up in the fantasy of finally finding someone who completes them, who will never leave them, who will fulfill all their needs without requiring anything genuine in return. 6 months after we met, David proposed on a hot air balloon at sunset. 8 months after we met, I walked down the aisle toward the man I thought would love me forever. I had no idea I was walking straight into a trap. The change was so gradual, I barely noticed it happening. It started with small comments about my appearance. "That dress makes you look a little wide in the hips, don't you think?" Or, "Maybe you should try a different hairstyle," something more sophisticated. Each criticism was carefully wrapped in concern, delivered with a kiss on my forehead and an, "I just want you to look your best." Then came the observations about my friends. "Don't you think Melissa talks about herself a lot? I'm surprised you can stand it." Or, "Jason seems to have a thing for you." I noticed how he kept finding excuses to touch your arm at dinner. It made me uncomfortable. One by one, my friendships began to feel complicated, loaded with new tensions I couldn't quite identify. It was easier to decline invitations than navigate David's subtle disapproval afterward. When I got the opportunity to show my photography at a small local gallery, David seemed supportive at first. But as the opening night approached, his enthusiasm waned. "Are you sure your work is ready for public display? Some of these shots feel amateur." I'm just trying to protect you from embarrassment. The night before the show, I found myself hunched over the toilet, violently ill with what David called pre-show nerves. He insisted on calling the gallery owner himself to cancel. "I'll handle it," he said, his voice full of compassion as he rubbed my back. "This is what husbands are for." I didn't make it to my own first gallery showing, and somehow I felt grateful to him for saving me from what he had framed as inevitable humiliation. My photography clients dwindled as David's career took off. It made sense for me to take on more household responsibilities while he worked longer hours. My dream of opening my own studio quietly slipped away, replaced by the more practical goal of supporting his success. "We're a team," he would remind me. "My success is your success." 6 months into our marriage, I realized I hadn't spoken to my sister in weeks. When I mentioned calling her, David sighed. "Your family is always so critical of our life choices. I get stressed every time you talk to them and come back questioning everything we've decided together." My world was shrinking, but I couldn't see it. I was too busy adapting, compromising, and telling myself this was what marriage looked like, two people becoming one. I just didn't realize that becoming one would mean losing myself entirely. By our first anniversary, the confident, creative woman who walked down the aisle had vanished. In her place was someone constantly seeking approval, someone who checked with her husband before making even the smallest decision, someone who had learned to doubt her own perceptions. The perfect man I married was disappearing too, revealing glimpses of someone colder, someone who kept score, someone whose love felt increasingly conditional on my compliance. But I clung to the memories of our early days, convinced that if I could just be better, more supportive, less needy, more understanding, that version of David would return permanently. I had no idea that man had never existed at all. I never said that. Those 4 words became the soundtrack of my marriage. 4 simple words that made me question my own sanity. We would have conversations, important ones about finances, family plans, or agreements we'd made, and days later, when I referenced them, David would look at me with genuine confusion. "I never said we could visit your parents for Christmas. Why would I agree to that when I've already told my family we're coming to them?" I would frantically search my memory, trying to replay his exact words. Had I misunderstood? Had I imagined the entire conversation? The certainty in his denial made me doubt myself. "Are you feeling okay? You've been doing this a lot lately, making up conversations we never had." The gaslighting escalated to physical objects. I put my car keys in their usual spot, only to find them missing. After tearing the house apart, I discovered them in a drawer I never use. "You probably put them there while you were distracted," David would say with concerned patience. "You've been so forgetful lately." One evening, I made a simple mistake while paying bills. David's reaction was volcanic. "How could you be so stupid? This is why I can't trust you with anything important," he shouted, slamming his fist on the table. I dissolved into tears, apologizing profusely, promising to be more careful. 10 minutes later, he was gently wiping my tears, his voice soft. "I hate seeing you cry. Why do you always push me to that point? You know I only get upset because I care so much." These dramatic mood swings left me emotionally whiplashed. I became hypervigilant, constantly monitoring his expressions, his tone, the tension in his shoulders, searching for early warning signs of an explosion. The worst part was how he behaved in public versus in private. At dinner parties or work functions, David was attentive, affectionate, even proud of me. He'd touch my back gently, laugh at my jokes, brag about my talents. Friends would comment on how lucky I was. "You two are such a perfect couple. David absolutely adores you. I can see it in the way he looks at you. You hit the jackpot with that one." On the drive home, the mask would slip. "Did you have to tell that boring story about your college trip? Everyone was just being polite. I saw you flirting with Mark. Do you enjoy humiliating me? My colleagues probably think I married an idiot after that comment you made about politics." I existed in 2 realities, the public one, where I was adored by a charming husband, and the private one where nothing I did was ever good enough. I began to doubt which version was real. Maybe the problem really was me. Our 3rd anniversary arrived. David forgot completely. When I carefully mentioned it that evening, he turned it around immediately. "You know I've been swamped with the Henderson project. If it was really important to you, you should have reminded me earlier. Now you've just made me feel guilty when I'm already stressed. I apologized for making him feel bad and went to bed early, curling into myself, wondering when exactly I had become someone who apologized for her own anniversary being forgotten. That night, I dreamed I was underwater, looking up at the distorted light of the surface, lungs burning, unable to scream. When I woke up gasping for air, I realized the dream wasn't just a dream. It was my life. Year 4 of our marriage brought a new job opportunity for David, a promotion that required relocation. I quietly mourned leaving behind the few connections I still maintained, but told myself this could be a fresh start for us. Perhaps in a new city, away from the pressures of his current position, David would become the man I'd fallen in love with again. We moved to Boston, to a beautiful brownstone that David insisted on choosing without me. "You're too indecisive," he explained. "It would just stress you out." I found a part-time job at a local art gallery, my first step back toward my own interests in years. David seemed supportive, even proud. For a few glorious weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. Then I made a new friend. Emma was the gallery's curator, bold, creative, and refreshingly direct. We connected instantly over our shared love of black and white photography. She invited me to join her photography group that met monthly to critique each other's work. "You should definitely come," she said. "From what you've told me, your eye for composition is incredible." I mentioned the invitation to David over dinner, trying to sound casual. His fork paused midway to his mouth. "A photography group? With strangers? That seems like a waste of time." "They're not exactly strangers," I said, my voice already shrinking. "Emma says they're all really talented and supportive." David's eyes narrowed. "Emma seems to be exerting a lot of influence over you lately." "She's just being friendly." He set down his fork. "Have you considered that she might have an agenda? New woman in town, seemingly vulnerable, separated from her friends and family? You're an easy target for someone like her." "Target for what?" I asked, genuinely confused. "People like Emma prey on people like you, Erin. She probably wants to pull you into her social circle to feel better about herself. Or worse." "Worse?" My stomach tightened. I've seen how these female friendships can turn toxic. "Next thing you know, she'll be telling you I'm controlling, that you need to find yourself, or some cliché like that." His voice became gentle, concerned. "I'm just trying to protect you, babe. I didn't join the photography group." Over the following weeks, I made excuses to Emma until she stopped asking. Eventually, I requested fewer hours at the gallery, feeling David's disapproval whenever I mentioned work. Winter came, and with it, a bone-deep depression unlike anything I'd experienced before. I moved through our beautiful home like a ghost, performing my duties as David's wife on autopilot. I smiled when appropriate, nodded at the right moments during his stories, and retreated further into myself. One snowy afternoon while David was on a business trip, I found myself sitting on our bathroom floor, staring at the cabinet where we kept medication. A dangerous thought floated through my mind. How many pills would it take to make this emptiness stop? The thought terrified me enough to call the only person I could think of, my older sister Kate, who I hadn't spoken to in over a year. "Erin." Her voice was cautious, surprised. "Is everything okay?" "I think I need help," I whispered, the words burning my throat on their way out. There was a pause, and then she said the words that would ultimately save my life. "I've been waiting for this call for 4 years. Tell me everything." So I did. Once I started talking, I couldn't stop. I told her about the isolation, the criticism, the constant feeling of walking on eggshells. I told her about the gaslighting, the control, the emotional whiplash of David's affection and cruelty. And finally, I admitted the darkest truth of all, that I no longer recognized myself. "Erin," Kate said when I finally fell silent, "what you're describing isn't love. It's abuse." The word landed like a physical blow. Abuse. I had never applied that word to my marriage. Abuse happened to other people. People who were weak, who didn't try hard enough, who provoked their partners. "But he never hit me," I said weakly. "He didn't have to," Kate replied. "He found something more effective." That conversation with Kate marked the beginning of my awakening. It was as if she had handed me a key to a door I hadn't even realized was locked. "I'm sending you some resources," she said before we hung up. "Articles, books, videos. Promise me you'll look at them." I did. Within hours, my email inbox filled with links and PDF attachments. The subject line read simply, "You are not crazy." I waited until I was certain David would be in meetings all day before opening the first link, an article titled, "30 Signs You're Married to a Narcissist." My hands trembled as I scrolled through the list, checking off item after item in my mind. They isolate you from loved ones. Check. They rewrite history and deny things that have happened. Check. They shift between adoration and cruel criticism. Check. They make you doubt your own perceptions and memories. Check. They're charming in public but different behind closed doors. Check. By the time I reached the end of the list, tears were streaming down my face. This wasn't just my story. It was the story of countless others. There was even a term for what I was experiencing: narcissistic abuse. I spent the entire day devouring everything Kate had sent. Videos of psychologists explaining the narcissistic abuse cycle. Testimonials from survivors. Scientific articles about the neurological impact of emotional abuse. Reading them was like finding pieces of a puzzle I'd been trying to solve for years. One book in particular, The Covert Narcissist's Playbook, detailed manipulation tactics, so specific to my experience with David that I had to put it down several times, my breathing shallow, my heart racing. It wasn't just that the authors seemed to be describing my husband, they were describing conversations we'd had verbatim. That night, I barely slept. My mind was reeling with this new framework for understanding my marriage. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't too sensitive. I wasn't a failure as a wife. I was being systematically manipulated by someone with a personality disorder. The next morning, I called in sick to the gallery and found a therapist who specialized in narcissistic abuse. She couldn't see me for 2 weeks, but she recommended an online support group that met that evening. Sitting in my car 3 blocks from our house, I joined the video call with my phone on mute, terrified someone might recognize me. I listened as women and men from across the country shared stories that mirrored my own with eerie similarity. My husband would tell me I was too emotional, then deliberately provoke me until I cried. My wife would ruin special occasions, then blame me for being disappointed. He'd make plans without consulting me, then accuse me of being controlling if I objected. She'd flirt with other men in front of me, then call me insecure and paranoid. The group moderator, Sarah, a domestic violence counselor, spoke directly to newcomers at the end of the session. If you're here for the first time, listening silently because you're not sure if your situation qualifies as abuse, I want you to hear this. Trust your gut. If you're walking on eggshells, constantly apologizing, feeling confused about what's real, or dreading your partner's moods, these are warning signs. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. Always. I unmuted just long enough to whisper, "Thank you," before signing off, my vision blurred with tears. David returned from his trip 2 days later. He walked through the door, kissed me on the cheek, and said, "The house looks like a mess. What have you been doing while I was gone?" 6 months earlier, I would have apologized profusely and scrambled to tidy up. This time, I simply looked at him and thought, "I see you now." I didn't confront him. I wasn't ready for that. Instead, I began what therapists call the gray rock method, becoming as uninteresting and unreactive as possible. When David criticized, I nodded neutrally. When he tried to provoke an emotional response, I gave brief, bland answers. When he love-bombed, I acknowledged it without reciprocating the intensity. The most dangerous time in an abusive relationship is when you're planning to leave. I had read this warning repeatedly in my research, and I believed it. David had never been physically violent, but I had watched him systematically dismantle my sense of self for years. What would he do when he realized he was losing control? I needed a plan, and for the first time in our marriage, I needed to keep secrets. Planning my escape was like a covert operation. Every move had to be calculated, every step hidden. I created a new email account on a library computer. I bought a prepaid phone that I kept in a zippered pocket of my winter boots. I set up video calls with Kate only during times I knew David would be unreachable. Together, we developed a strategy. First, I needed to secure my essential documents. One afternoon while David was golfing with clients, I photographed our marriage certificate, my birth certificate, our tax returns, and financial statements. I emailed the images to my secret account and return the originals exactly as I'd found them. Next, I needed money. David controlled our finances completely. I received a small allowance for household expenses, but everything else required his approval. So I began a careful process of financial extraction. When grocery shopping, I'd buy gift cards and hide them in a hollow book on my nightstand, one of the many novels David dismissed as women's trash and would never touch. I sold a few pieces of jewelry he'd given me during the love-bombing phase, telling the jeweler they brought back painful memories of a deceased relative. I picked up extra shifts at the gallery and told the owner to hold part of my pay until I could collect it later. Dollar by dollar, I built my escape fund. The hardest part was maintaining the facade of normalcy. David had become increasingly irritable in response to my gray rock approach. My emotional flatness both confused and angered him. He tried every tactic to regain control: extravagant gifts, vicious insults, tearful apologies, cold silence, cycling through them with increasing desperation. "What's wrong with you lately?" he demanded one night after I responded to a particularly cruel comment with a simple, "I'm sorry you feel that way." "Nothing," I said. "I'm just tired." "Bullshit," he snapped. "You're different. Are you seeing someone? Is that it?" "No, David. I'm not cheating on you." He narrowed his eyes. "Then what? Are you on medication? Drugs?" Because the woman I married had emotions. The irony was almost painful. For years, he had systematically crushed my emotional expression, punishing me for being too sensitive, mocking my tears, dismissing my joy. Now that I had finally learned to contain my emotions as a survival strategy, he was demanding them back. "I'm just trying to be the kind of wife you want," I said quietly. "Someone who doesn't overreact." This seemed to momentarily satisfy him, though I could see the suspicion lingering behind his eyes. The weeks passed. My escape fund grew. My therapist guided me through trauma recovery techniques. The online support group became my lifeline, a place where I could speak truthfully about my experience without fear of judgment or disbelief. I set a date, July 15th, 6 weeks away. Kate would drive from Philadelphia to Boston. We would pack only what would fit in her car while David was at an all-day golf tournament. By the time he returned home, I would be gone. Then, 3 weeks before my planned departure, fate intervened. I was in our home office printing photographs for a gallery display when a notification popped up on David's computer, which was linked to the printer. An email from someone named Vanessa with the subject line, "Last night was amazing." I shouldn't have looked. I had spent years respecting David's privacy, even as he violated mine repeatedly. But something, intuition, perhaps, or simply self-preservation, made me click. The email opened to reveal intimate details of an affair that had apparently been going on for months. There were references to hotel meetings, inside jokes, and plans for their next encounter. Vanessa signed off with, "Poor wifey still has no clue. Love keeping our secret, XO." I felt nothing at first. No rage, no heartbreak, no betrayal. Just a strange, detached clarity. Of course, he was having an affair. It aligned perfectly with the narcissistic patterns I'd been studying. His recent increase in criticism toward me, the unexplained late nights, the sudden interest in his appearance. Classic signs of narcissistic infidelity. But then, beneath that clinical analysis, something else emerged. Not jealousy, but liberation. This was my way out. I forwarded the email chain to my secret account, then carefully marked the message unread on David's computer. I took screenshots of text messages I found when searching Vanessa's name. I documented everything, building a case not for confrontation, but for leverage. That night I called Kate. "We need to move up the timeline," I said. "How soon can you get here?" 2 days, she replied without hesitation. "Is everything okay?" I surprised myself by laughing, a genuine laugh I hadn't experienced in years. "No," I said. "Everything is perfect. I found my ticket to freedom." Kate arrived early on a Wednesday morning. David had left for work an hour earlier, kissing me on the cheek and reminding me to schedule the carpet cleaners, blissfully unaware that his carefully constructed world was about to implode. We worked quickly, methodically. Kate had brought plastic storage, bins that we filled with only what was undeniably mine, clothing I had purchased, gifts from my family, my photography equipment. I left behind the jewelry he had given me, the designer clothes he had selected, anything that could be construed as ours. I didn't want a single thing that could give him reason to contact me later. As we packed, I felt lighter with each item that went into the bins. By noon, Kate's car was loaded, and we were doing a final sweep of the house when we heard the front door open. My blood froze. David wasn't supposed to be home until evening. "Erin!" His voice echoed through the foyer. "Why is there a car in the driveway?" Kate squeezed my hand. "You've got this," she whispered. "I'm right here." I walked downstairs to find David standing in the living room, his expression shifting rapidly from confusion to understanding as he took in my jacket and purse. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice eerily calm. "I'm leaving," I said simply. He laughed, that condescending laugh I had come to dread. "Don't be ridiculous. Where would you go? What would you do? You can barely function without me." "I'll manage." His eyes narrowed as Kate appeared behind me. "Ah, I see your sister has been filling your head with nonsense again. What did she tell you? That I'm controlling, that you deserve better." "She didn't have to tell me anything, David. I figured it out myself." I took a deep breath. "I know about Vanessa." The flash of panic that crossed his face was quickly replaced by righteous indignation. "Are you spying on me now? Invading my privacy? This is exactly why our marriage has problems, because you're paranoid and insecure." Classic Darvo: deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. Another tactic I had studied extensively. "Our marriage has problems because you're abusive," I said, my voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. "I've spent years walking on eggshells, doubting my own memories, and taking blame for your behavior. I'm done." His face darkened. "Abusive? You've got to be kidding me." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I gave you everything. A beautiful home, financial security, a life most women would envy. And this is how you repay me? By throwing around ridiculous accusations. In the past, this approach would have worked. I would have backed down, apologized, begged for forgiveness. But I was no longer that woman. "I don't need to convince you," I said. "I don't need your permission or approval. I'm informing you of my decision as a courtesy." "You'll be back," he scoffed. "When reality hits and you realize you can't survive out there, you'll come crawling back. And I might not take you." I almost laughed at the predictability of it. My therapist had warned me about this exact response, the narcissist's desperate attempt to maintain control when all else fails. "I've left copies of your correspondence with Vanessa with my lawyer," I lied, watching his face pale. "I'm not interested in dragging this out or causing a scene. Sign the divorce papers when they arrive, and we can both move on with minimal drama." "You manipulative bitch," he hissed, his mask slipping completely. "You planned this? Went behind my back? After everything I've done for you?" Kate stepped forward. "We're leaving now, David. Step aside." He blocked the doorway, his body vibrating with rage. "This isn't over. You think you can just walk away? I made you. Without me, you're nothing." In that moment, looking at the contorted face of the man I had once believed hung the moon, I felt a profound sense of clarity. This person had never loved me, not really. He had loved what I provided: admiration, validation, an audience for his performance, a receptacle for his insecurities. "Move, David," I said quietly, "or the next call will be to the police, and we can explain to them and all the neighbors why I'm leaving." The threat of public exposure, of damage to his carefully cultivated image, worked. He stepped aside, his face a mask of contempt. "You'll regret this," he said as we walked past him. "When you're struggling to pay bills, when you're alone at night, when you realize no one will ever love you like I did, you'll remember this moment and hate yourself for it." I paused at the door and turned to face him one last time. "You never loved me, David. You loved controlling me. There's a difference." We drove away with him standing in the doorway, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. In the rearview mirror, our beautiful prison of a house grew distant, then disappeared entirely. "You did it," Kate said, squeezing my knee. "You're free." But as the adrenaline of the confrontation faded, I knew the hardest part was still ahead. I had escaped the physical cage, but the psychological one would take much longer to dismantle. The first months of freedom were both exhilarating and terrifying. I moved into Kate's spare bedroom, filed for divorce, and started rebuilding my life one small piece at a time. David didn't go quietly. There were the late-night phone calls that I learned not to answer, the alternating messages of desperate love and vicious hatred that I saved but didn't respond to, the accidental run-ins with mutual friends where he portrayed himself as the abandoned husband blindsided by an ungrateful wife, the attempts to access my new email accounts, my bank information, my social media. His need for control didn't disappear just because I had. I maintained what therapists call no contact, the only truly effective strategy for escaping a narcissist. I communicated solely through my lawyer, blocked him on every platform, and warned family and friends not to relay messages or information. The hardest part wasn't the practical challenges of starting over, finding work, establishing credit in my own name, learning to make decisions without second-guessing myself. The hardest part was rebuilding my identity from the ground up. Who was I without David? What did I actually like, want, believe? After years of morphing myself to please him, I hardly knew. I started small. What food did I genuinely enjoy? What music made me feel good? What time did I naturally want to wake up in the morning? These seemingly simple questions were profound acts of reclamation. I returned to photography, joining a local arts collective where I could use their darkroom and equipment until I saved enough to buy my own. The first time someone praised my work, I waited for the familiar twist of anxiety, the certainty that they were just being nice, that I wasn't really talented. But it didn't come. Slowly, I was learning to trust external validation again. 6 months after leaving, I experienced a setback. A mutual friend mentioned seeing David with a new woman, someone young, eager to please, with the same vulnerable look I once had. He was apparently telling everyone she was a soulmate, that he'd never felt this way before. I spent 3 days in bed, consumed by a toxic cocktail of emotions. Not jealousy. I didn't want him back, but fear for this woman, guilt that I hadn't somehow exposed him publicly, and a deep, shameful sense of replacement. Had I been so forgettable, so interchangeable? My therapist helped me see the truth. This wasn't about my value. It was about his pathology. The narcissist needs a constant source of supply, admiration, attention, control. When one source is removed, they must quickly find another. This woman wasn't my replacement. She was his next victim. You can't save her, my therapist said gently. She wouldn't believe you if you tried. Just like you wouldn't have believed someone who tried to warn you during your early days with David. She was right. All I could do was focus on my own healing and hope that someday this woman would find her way out too. As the 1-year anniversary of my escape approached, I moved into my own apartment, a small, sunlit space decorated exactly as I wanted. No expensive minimalist furniture that valued appearance over comfort. No stark color scheme chosen to impress guests. Just warm colors, soft textures, and walls covered with my photography and art from friends. My home, my refuge. The divorce was finalized around the same time. David fought it viciously, then suddenly conceded everything. A classic narcissistic pattern of trying to maintain control until the very end, then attempting to seem magnanimous when defeat was inevitable. I expected to feel elated when I received the final papers. Instead, I felt quiet, steady relief, and something else I hadn't anticipated, compassion. Not for the man who had systematically dismantled my sense of self, but for the broken person inside him who would never experience genuine connection, who would continue the cycle of idealization and devaluation with partner after partner, always searching for a fulfillment that his own pathology made impossible. On the day marking exactly 1 year since I left, I stood in front of the mirror in my new home. The woman looking back at me wasn't the same one who had once disappeared into a narcissist's demands. Her eyes were clearer, her stance more grounded, her expression peaceful. "You made it," I whispered to my reflection. And for the first time in years, I fully recognized the woman staring back at me. I was home. 3 years have passed since I walked out of that beautiful prison. 3 years of therapy, support groups, tears, laughter, setbacks, and triumphs. 3 years of rebuilding myself from the foundation up. I won't pretend it was easy. Recovery from narcissistic abuse isn't linear. There were days I made enormous strides forward, and days the trauma pulled me back into darkness. There were moments of euphoric freedom, and moments I questioned every decision, every perception, the lingering effects of years of gaslighting. But I kept going. I kept healing. And now, I'm ready to share what I've learned. If you're reading this and recognizing your own relationship in my story, here's what I want you to know. First, trust your instincts. That sick feeling in your stomach when your partner twists your words or denies what you know happened. That's your internal warning system trying to protect you. It's not anxiety or oversensitivity or any of the other labels they've given it. It's your truth trying to break through the fog. Second, document everything. Keep a secret journal, email yourself conversations, save texts and messages. Gaslighting thrives in the absence of evidence. When you have concrete proof that your memories are accurate, it's harder to make you doubt your reality. Third, build a stealth support network. Find at least one person you can trust completely. If family and friends have been pushed away, reach out to domestic violence hotlines. Emotional abuse is domestic violence, even without physical harm. Connect with online support groups where you can speak freely without fear of exposure. Fourth, plan your exit carefully. The most dangerous time in an abusive relationship is when you leave. Even if your partner has never been physically violent, emotional abusers can escalate when they feel control slipping away. Have your important documents, some money, and a safe place to go before you make any moves. Fifth, prepare for the aftermath. Narcissists don't let go easily. Expect smear campaigns, hoovering, attempts to suck you back in, flying monkeys, people recruited to reach out on their behalf, and continued attempts to control you through any available channels. Maintain no contact whenever possible. And finally, be patient with your recovery. The wounds from psychological abuse run deep. Your brain has been rewired by trauma. Your sense of self has been systematically attacked. Healing takes time, professional help, and enormous self-compassion. For those who haven't experienced narcissistic abuse but want to support someone who has, believe them. The most devastating aspect of this type of abuse is how invisible it is, how easy to deny, how difficult to prove. Your belief might be the lifeline they need to start trusting themselves again. As for me, my life today is unrecognizable from what it once was. I've opened my own photography studio, specializing in portraits that capture the authentic essence of my subjects. There's something deeply healing about helping others see their true beauty after spending so long having mine denied. I've formed new friendships based on mutual respect rather than power dynamics. I've even started dating again, slowly, cautiously, with firm boundaries and a finely tuned awareness of red flags. Most importantly, I've reclaimed my voice. The voice that tells my story not with shame, but with purpose. The voice that might help someone else recognize their cage before the door locks behind them. Narcissists don't need fists to destroy you, they use your own mind against you. They weaponize your vulnerabilities, your capacity for love, your willingness to work on yourself. They turn your best qualities, empathy, loyalty, forgiveness, into tools of your own destruction. But healing is possible. Freedom is possible. A rich, full life after narcissistic abuse is not just possible, it's your birthright. If you're still in the fog, still questioning whether what you're experiencing is really abuse, still making excuses for behavior that diminishes you, I was once exactly where you are. And I'm here to tell you there's another side. A side where you remember who you are, where your feelings matter, where peace replaces chaos. The door to your cage isn't locked from the outside. It never was. You have the key. You've always had it. And when you're ready, an entire community of survivors is waiting to welcome you home. If this story resonated with you, or you know someone who might be trapped in a similar situation, hit subscribe now. I share new survivor stories every week that the narcissists in our lives don't want us to tell. Turn on notifications so you never miss the validation and strategies you deserve. Your healing journey starts with one click.